The Legend of Zelda series is very special to me, as it is to many people around the world. It is without a doubt my favorite video game series of all time. That's never going to change. It is amazing that a series that is almost 35 years old and has around 19 games in its mainline series still offers a consistently amazing experience. Today, I will be looking at the history of The Legend of Zelda and how it is a prime example of adapting with time to remain relevant. I will be looking at a few important games to the series, mainly the original Legend of Zelda game, A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, and finally, Breath of the Wild. Now, let's start with the man behind it all, Shigeru Miyamoto. He's the senior executive director of Nintendo, and general producer of the Legend of Zelda series. Oh, and also an all-around cool dude. Miyamoto started working on Zelda in the mid-80s, while also working on Super Mario Bros. Miyamoto wanted to use the new Famicom disk system's ability to rewrite data by making a game that allowed two players to create dungeons for each other to explore. After testing, the general consensus was that the dungeon exploring was the best part of the game, and people really didn't want to make their own levels. With that feedback, Miyamoto's team took the idea and made a single-player game out of it, eventually adding forests, lakes, and fields to add more atmosphere to the game. This is what eventually grew to be the game we all know today. The Legend of Zelda was first released in Japan on February 21st, 1986, for the Famicom, originally under the name Hyrule Fantasy: The Legend of Zelda, starring the series' iconic main character, Link. The game was released a year later in the United States, this time using battery-packed memory. The game had heavy emphasis on exploration. From the moment you start the game, you could go anywhere on the map. Miyamoto really wanted to give the player a sense of wonder and freedom, which he based on his own feelings while venturing around his childhood home, exploring the woods and caves with his little homemade lantern. And it worked! The Legend of Zelda was a massive hit, selling 6.5 million copies in its lifetime. With this success, Miyamoto and his team immediately went to work on sequels. 1 year after the original, the second game in the series, The Adventure of Link, was released. It featured side-scrolling 2D action type of gameplay. On April 13th, 1991, the third entry in the series, The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past, was released on the SNES, with a return to top-down gameplay. This game introduced many features that would become staples of the series, like a focus on a deeper story, a wide selection of swappable items, and the introduction of the iconic Master Sword. Due to being on a new 16-bit console, the game pushed the boundaries of what a game could be, while staying true to the series' origins. The graphics were clearer and more vibrant. The game was longer, and because the SNES can produce richer sound, the developers were able to experiment more with the music, making it feel grander and more heroic. The Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past was what everyone loved about the original game times a million, and it showed, selling over 4 million copies in its lifetime. But that doesn't even compare to the next biggest game advancement in the series. It was not only important to the Zelda series, but possibly the entire gaming industry as a whole. The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time was the first 3D Zelda game. It was released on November 21st, 1998 to massive success, selling 2 million copies in its first 39 days. Its plot was to date the deepest in the series, featuring a fully fleshed out world with many memorable characters and even a time travel mechanic. Link's decisions as a kid affected the world around him when he traveled 7 years into the future. As a player, you truly felt that your decisions were important and had a real impact on the world. The game is highly praised even to this day, scoring the #1 spot on the best game of all time on Metacritic despite being out for over 20 years. Zelda continues to have success throughout the years, releasing game after game each to critical acclaim, but something happened. While yes, the Zelda series remained very innovative and captivating, it seemed to lose its original vision. This became clear with the release of Skyward Sword. We had received a lot of comments saying how the players wanted to explore the space between different areas. That gave us an opportunity. We had always aimed to create worlds in Zelda games that you could play in endlessly, yet at some point, we had become constrained by our expectations. Nintendo was well aware that their series had changed. They were releasing games that were more linear and story-focused, instead of releasing games that allowed the player to explore and make their own adventures. So, after Skyward Sword, the team behind Zelda decided to take a different approach. I told the staff, this time, let's build the game without shying away from anything. Let's stop thinking about what Zelda has been up until now. And, with this new goal in mind, a long 5-year development cycle began on what would become the new gold standard in Zelda video games. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was released on March 3rd, 2017, both on the Wii U and Nintendo's newest home console, the Switch. And man, the game was unlike anything the Zelda series had seen before. It was a completely open-world game where you can go anywhere, climb anything, use the environment and tools however you wanted. Basically, if you thought you could do something, you most likely could. The game clearly wanted you to make your own adventure. It didn't give you much. What it did give you was some tools, a world to explore, and an objective which you can go complete at any time. Zelda's in a castle, go save her! Now leave! The game does have a story, but it's completely optional. You could explore the game at your own pace. You can make a straight shot to Ganon's castle right from the get-go, or you could just spend your days messing around with the game engine. This refocus on player freedom and going back to the roots of Zelda was a big risk. The Zelda team was expecting to revise expectations on one of the biggest gaming franchises in the world. But in the end, it was definitely well worth it. Breath of the Wild quickly became the best-selling Legend of Zelda game of all time, selling over 16 million copies at the time of this recording. It has won numerous game awards, including Game Awards Game of the Year 2017.
Thank you, America!
This game is a perfect example of what makes the Legend of Zelda franchise so popular, even after all this time. It keeps the original idea of unlimited exploration and creating your own adventure, while updating and innovating the idea to a game that can hold up to the test of time. The sequel to Breath of the Wild had a teaser trailer released on June 11th, 2019, which seemed to confirm, moving forward, that the Zelda games would follow in Breath of the Wild's footsteps. Hopefully, Nintendo will continue to make Zelda games that will challenge and innovate their own formula, while keeping true to the game's core identity, to allow players the freedom to explore a world filled with adventures to be made. Because if the history of the Legend of Zelda series is anything to go off of, it definitely works.